maybe celebrating this US-Iran deal, but not everyone is popping champagne. Messages coming out of Iran right now tell a very different story. Ordinary Iranians, people who lived through anti-government protests, the airstrikes, the hunger, the blackouts, they're now reading through this memorandum and asking one simple question: where are we in this? The deal talks about uranium, it talks about Lebanon, it talks about frozen assets and oil sanctions, but for many Iranians on the street, their lives and their rights, their dead, are nowhere in this text. One message that was sent to the news outlet Iran International put it very bluntly: we gave our fallen, we endured more hunger and poverty, we were killed unjustly, but uranium was the main issue. And another called it a deal signed, quote, over the bodies of Iran's children. Well, joining us now is Armin Navabi, Iranian political analyst. Armin, these messages from inside Iran describe betrayal, they describe grief, rage, really. Does this reflect what you are hearing broadly from Iranians from within Iran and also the diaspora as well? How deep is this disillusionment?
It is very significant. I do, on a daily basis, I have a show, a YouTube show that my audience is inside Iran, and people come up and they give me their opinions. And, every single day when Iranians come up and speak to me, and also in the live chat, you could see that they're very disappointed. They feel betrayed. They feel forgotten. That is true. I do try to push back against it, and I try to promote some hope and a sense that this is actually not the betrayal that they think it is. It is a very difficult thing for me to do, because most of the comments seems to be really upset regarding how things are going. However, I do think that I'm actually, at least on my show with Iranians inside Iran, I'm actually successful in, pointing a few things out to them that at the beginning of the show, people's attitude changes completely compared to the end of my show. And if you want, I could tell you exactly what I tell them that makes them feel more hopeful regarding. Okay, so first of all, I tell them that no matter how disappointed they are with President Trump, what we got from President Trump was against the Islamic Republic was far more significant than any president in U.S. history. So don't compare to what President Trump did compared to what you wanted him to do. Compare what he did compared to any other president. The Islamic Republic has never been this weak. The amount of damage that the President Trump and alongside with Prime Minister Netanyahu have done to the Islamic Republic has made us years closer
but Armin,
to toppling the regime.
I just have to ask you, I mean, it's true what you're saying. It's absolutely true. But the reality on the ground right now is that we're still seeing the Islamic Republic maintain power. And now we're looking at what is reportedly going to be $300 billion that are going to be funneled to rebuild Iran. And of course, I'm assuming that much of that will go to the Islamic Republic rebuilding itself and its military capabilities.
So actually, the $300 billion, if it is what they say it is actually damaging to the IRGC rather than helping the IRGC. Because first of all, the economy of the Islamic Republic right now is not in a situation where it could absorb $300. These $300 billion is supposed to be by private businesses, to private businesses. It's not supposed to be from the United States, and no private entity would spend billions of dollars in Iran when the IRGC has a monopoly over 2/3 of the economy and could shut down and destroy. So remember, IRGC is power and control comes from is dominance over Iran's economy. So anything that opens that economy, so it's based on isolationism, it's based on a command economy structure, it's based on having monopolies over main industries within Iran, and it's also based on anti-Americanism and being anti-Israeli. So these $300 billion is supposed to be for the private sector, which is the biggest threat to the IRGC's dominance over Iran's economy. And without the IRGC being dismantled or without it losing control over the economy, no private sector will actually, if you invest in Iran to private businesses with IRGC still having control over the economy, it's just basically burning your money. So that money will not make it into Iran unless IRGC loses its grip over the economy. And if that happens, plus with the competition with the private sector, that would be the beginning of the end of IRGC's control and dominance. So this is not $300 billion that will go to IRGC. This is $300 billion that will go to IRGC's competition, which is the private sector that the IRGC for years has been trying to destroy and weaken. So I don't see it like that. And that's another thing.
So then I guess that leads me to the question of what was the incentive to sign this deal at this point, if that is indeed going to be the case, because obviously we are seeing, it is fair to say that the Islamic Republic is in a weaker place than it's ever been. But, you know, at the same time, it's still maintaining a certain level of strength.
So the thing to remember is that this is not a deal. This is an MOU, and it's non-binding, and it's only and United States can still do whatever it wants because it's the enforcer. Like, who's the enforcer of the MOU? The enforcer is the United States. So that means basically, if it's binding on the Islamic Republic and not the United States. United States doesn't have to abide by anything that is written in the document. It could just look at whatever the Islamic Republic does, and it's not happy, it could go back to bombardment whenever they want, and nobody can do anything about it. So the MOU is, to me, the MOU is about giving Ghalibaf the advantage, because I think the Americans have found an inside man in the Islamic Republic that is helping the Americans weaken the IRGC and the supreme leadership without military actions. And Ghalibaf needs to be able to sell this internally to some regime supporters, or else they will completely eliminate him. The MOU needs to be written in a language that he could convince at least some people that this is not as bad for the Islamic Republic. I think there are two agreements that are being discussed here. One that is on the MOU, which is just for show, and something that the Ghalibaf could have some chance of selling it to an internal audience. But then there's an actual agreement between the Americans and the Islamic Republic, which is something that Ghalibaf, I think, has more fully submitted to President Trump regarding what behavior he's going to try to enforce on. But it's hard to do because IRGC still has a lot of power. But it seems like Ghalibaf has temporarily been able to maintain control and become the dominant player within the Islamic Republic with the help of the Americans. So if you have somebody within the Islamic Republic that is selling out IRGC and the supreme leadership and the Paidari camp with the help of the threats from Americans, this is a much more efficient, less costly, less chaotic way of slowly lowering the power of IRGC and their grip on power within the Islamic Republic. And I know a lot of people wanted this to be a sprint. I think it's more of a marathon. And we did. I mean, I think the Americans and Israelis experimented with seeing if this is a sprint. It ended up not being a sprint. It's a marathon. I see a lot of people being disappointed because they wanted the toppling of the regime happen faster, and it's completely justified because the Iranian people are suffering and people are being executed. So it's completely understandable. It is important to remember that we are moving in the right direction, though, even though it's not happening as fast as we want. Every single month, the Islamic Republic is getting weaker, and every single month, the Iranian opposition under the leadership of Prince Reza Pahlavi is getting stronger against the Islamic Republic. So as long as we keep moving in this direction, we'll eventually going to win.
Final thing that I just want to ask you, if you could just answer this in one line, because we have to move soon to a commercial break. Do you think the majority of the Iranian public still trusts this U.S. administration?
The majority of the Iranian people trust Israel and Prime Minister Netanyahu, and honestly any other prime minister that comes into power within Israel. On the United States, there's a lot more division right now. I have to admit, there's a lot more division. I try to convince them that even if they're frustrated with President Trump, we have to be grateful that he's a president that has done more than any other president, and we have built a lot of bridges with the Americans, and it doesn't make sense for us to burn those bridges. So I try to convince them to keep supporting President Trump.
All right, Armin, it was fascinating to hear your take on all of this. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.